The Baltimore Ravens have finally broken their silence on Justin Tucker. We talk about that. John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta making bold claims and takeaways from their press conferences, all that and more coming up on an instant reaction live edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day or your afternoon, as it's just after 2 p.m. Eastern time on February 25th. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens part of your day, your first listen each and every single day, as we are free and available for you all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube and over in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. And we have a lot to dive into today. Of course, we're a 5-day-a-week Ravens show, but we do go live after every single piece of Ravens big news. And I figure that Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh breaking their silence on the Justin Tucker situation and honestly putting together some bold claims, particularly about Ronnie Stanley. We're going to be talking about Mark Andrews as well. There's a lot to dive into, and of course, we'll dive into that throughout the rest of the week as well. But this is just the instant reaction. Of course, we go live after every Ravens game, but we don't have any Ravens games to go live after for the foreseeable future. So it's nice to be able to hop on, do a live. We'll get some opinions from whoever's tuning in live in the chat. If you're watching after the fact, video form, audio form, be sure to make your opinions known as well. We got CJ in the house. What's up, CJ? Appreciate you tuning in. Zeke, what's up? Anonymous, I appreciate you for the support. And this is what I like, all right? We're going to get the opinions of everybody, so be sure to turn notifications on so you know when we go live over here on Locked On Ravens, a little Tuesday afternoon live stream. Let's just jump right in, though, with the Justin Tucker situation. Now, John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta were both asked multiple questions about it, and both answered them. If you listen to this morning's episode of Locked On Ravens, I know that there were some questions about would they even answer questions about the Tucker situation, or would they kind of say, here's a statement and, that'll be that. They did answer them. And let's start off with what Eric DeCosta had to say. He went first and was asked, I think, about 3 or 4 questions about the situation in general, but his statement on it at first ended up being the allegations are serious and concerning. The amount of allegations are serious and concerning. I think we're fortunate that the league is doing an investigation. We'll wait as patiently as we can for as much information as we can, and we'll make our decision based on that and decisions based on that as well. And also, Eric DeCosta said the team, this is a big one. They're going to evaluate the kicker position like every position, and they'll go and rank their draft board, which, of course, John Harbaugh's statement on that a little more direct, but even so, I think that without the Tucker allegations and everything, people were still going to be wondering, well, what does the future hold for Justin Tucker, right? I think that we got a pretty clear answer, not in terms of like whether he'll be on the team or not, but whether the Ravens are evaluating kicker options. And the answer to that, my big takeaway, is a resounding yes. DeCosta was asked when he and the Ravens first learned of the Justin Tucker allegations. He said, quote, "We were aware that a local media outlet was preparing to do a story on Justin Tucker, and that was the first time we became aware of those allegations or the potential allegations that might result." He also said, quote, "I did meet with Justin. I'm going to keep those comments to myself. Personal conversations with Justin is probably the smart thing to do, but at that point, we did meet, and that's what I'm going to say about that." So that pretty much sums up what Eric DeCosta had to say about it. John Harbaugh, on the other hand, he had some things to say on it as well. Kind of not this exact same line of questioning, but there were definitely some more line of questionings. John Harbaugh said, this is not something that you want to wake up and read. You don't want to read about it. The things that are hurtful and harmful to people, there's too many headlines like that, too many stories that you hear that make you sad and disappointed. The NFL is looking into it. They're going to review it. They're going to try to gather all the facts, and I'm sure we'll have an understanding of it at the time. And then once there is an understanding of it, then you'll have a chance to make some decisions and determinations. That's where we're at right now. He was also asked when he learned about the Justin Tucker situation. He said, I learned after Eric told me. I think right before it came out, maybe the banner had called Eric and told him that there was something coming out. We didn't know anything about what it was going to be, so I knew what it was when I read it. And then a week and a half, 2 weeks after that, I called Justin on a Sunday morning. We had a conversation about it. We talked about it more from a perspective of being together for all these years and kind of what he was going through and what he was dealing with that and how he was handling it with his family. That's really what we talked about. Now, these comments, the NFL is doing an investigation. I'm sure John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta were choosing their words carefully, and the NFL is going to do their due diligence. And that obviously was a big point of what Harbaugh and DeCosta had to say. But John Harbaugh was then asked about what about the kicker position in general. He ended up saying, well, quote, we're looking at kickers. The kicker position would have been a priority no matter what. Justin's our kicker. We love him. Always expected him to keep going forever, but nobody goes forever. And whether the Ravens, they have 11 draft picks. They could easily, if there's a kicker they really like, if they find a guy that they really like, they want to go and figure out, okay, this is the kicker of the future. Because look, Tucker, if he stays on the team or if not, doesn't matter which scenario, he's not the next 15-year kicker of the Baltimore Ravens. So for the Ravens, they're going to look at that position, and it's not like John Harbaugh or Eric DeCosta's comments tell me that, okay, he's definitely staying on the team or definitely not staying on the team. But after a while of allegations popping up, I think people wanted to hear from Harbaugh and DeCosta. This was the opportunity for them to speak their mind on it a little bit, obviously while staying within the confines of the investigation and what they want to say. I don't know what the personal conversations between Harbaugh and DeCosta and Tucker were, but it's a situation where we don't know how long the NFL's investigation is going to go. This could be an investigation that lasts maybe a couple of weeks, maybe it goes a couple of months, but if it extends through beyond the draft, I'd still expect the Ravens to operate as, okay, look, we're going to go and figure out what we need to do to secure. And regardless, I think there's going to be competition for Justin Tucker. Let's just put a scenario out that Justin Tucker stays on the team. Let's say that's the decision the Ravens make and he ends up staying. I think there will still be, whether you want to call it competition or just another legitimate kicker in the organization to compete with him, which honestly, we haven't really seen over the course of Justin Tucker's career. Yes, there have been camp bodies that have come in and contributed and taken the load off of Justin Tucker, but I think this is now a different situation, allegations aside, and that's a different conversation, but just of, okay, how much does Justin Tucker have left in the tank in general? So about 4 or 5 questions each for John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta. This is probably not the last we are going to hear about that situation, right? I mean, we're going to hear about it for as long as it goes. And if he stays on the team, we're going to hear about it until he retires and probably after that. But the Ravens have a big decision to make here. And whether new allegations come out or not about Tucker, we're going to have to remain to be seen. Maybe new things are uncovered by the NFL that we don't even know about right now. But Harbaugh and DeCosta staying pretty consistent in the fact that, DeCosta ended up hearing it from Harbaugh ended up hearing it from DeCosta. I got that mixed up. Harbaugh got it from DeCosta, and then DeCosta said that the local media outlet, that being the Baltimore Banner, they were preparing to do the story on Justin Tucker. So it was good to kind of hear them talk about the situation. Again, I know, they weren't going to go up there and either bury him or go into immense detail on what they had heard in the investigation. That was never an expectation. It should have never been an expectation for anybody that they were going to go in there and just go up on that podium and speak for 30 minutes on Justin Tucker, dive into every single detail, right? That was never going to be the case. But as the situation evolves, so will the opinions, so will the Ravens' decision-making. And I don't know when we're going to get a decision on Justin Tucker. Obviously, in terms of cap implications, I've said this multiple times on the show, the Ravens can save money if they release Justin Tucker as a post-June 1 cut. They can announce that before the new league year starts. They can designate 2 guys to be post-June 1 cuts before post-June 1, so they get that money right up front, right when free agency starts. Marcus Williams is going to be one of those if they so choose, and whether the NFL's investigation turns up stuff the Ravens aren't comfortable with, or they decide they want to move on, or they want a fresh start or whatever. the Ravens can use the money for, I think it's right around $5-ish million in savings, if I'm not mistaken. They can use that money at the start of free agency if they designate Tucker alongside Marcus Williams as a post-June 1 cut. So it's about a bunch of different factors, obviously on field with Tucker, and obviously the off-field allegation situation that you could determine, hey, is Justin Tucker going to be a member of this team in 2024 or 2025 now, or is he not? So all of those things factoring in, but John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta, the Baltimore Ravens breaking their silence on the Justin Tucker situation. And of course, we'll continue to talk about that as it all develops. But coming up, we're going to be talking about John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta making some bold claims, particularly on Ronnie Stanley. Also, Mark Andrews, as his future is set in stone in Baltimore, as some might think. We're going to dive into all that and more coming up next on Locked On Ravens. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday instant reaction live edition of the show. Love these lives here. Love interacting with the chat. I see Joe is full force in the chat. Appreciate you tuning in, Joe. We got some stuff from Zeke I want to get to as well. Joe saying trade for Jake Bates, Arkansas legend over there doing. Look, that's a great kicker. The Ravens, they're going to have to decide what they want to do with their kicker. I see Lettuce here, trade Justin to the Browns or cut him. Hey, Myles Garrett for Justin Tucker. Maybe the Ravens can throw in like a fifth to make it fair, right? That's my agenda here for the Ravens. But let's talk a little bit about the Ravens with Ronnie Stanley, because both John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta, they had some things to say about Ronnie. It started off with Eric DeCosta. It's a big conversation point. Ronnie Stanley is the Ravens' biggest free agent. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about that here. And so on re-signing Ronnie Stanley, Eric DeCosta says, you never want to say 100%, but I feel good that we'll have a healthy debate, a good process. We're going to meet with his agent in Indy this week, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get a deal done. Now, optimistic is a great word, and I feel like for the Ravens, if there was a free agent to prioritize, it would be Ronnie Stanley. So I think that's a great sign, because I feel like even if the Ravens do move off of Ronnie Stanley, they have a couple of options. John Harbaugh did talk about that, where, Roger Rosengarten could flip over to the left side and they draft a right tackle, or they sign somebody, who knows. But Stanley is projected right now on the market right around 2 years, $20 million per season, $21 million per season. The increase in salary cap helps the Ravens potentially go out there and sign a guy like Ronnie back, where an extra $5 to $10 million is not going to make or break the Ravens offseason. Like, they can go out there and sign 5 different big free agents now. But maybe the Ravens were only comfortable offering Ronnie a certain amount, but with that cap increase, they can up their offer a little bit. Ronnie's obviously been a lifelong Raven, has been one of the most consistent offensive linemen in this team's history, despite the injury history that he's had. And John Harbaugh kind of took it a bit of a step further with Ronnie Stanley, saying that, look, he said, I think we'll probably keep Ronnie, hopeful that we will. So Harbaugh and DeCosta seem to be on the same wavelength that Ronnie's going to be a part of this team in 2025. That was one of my big takeaways. Nothing set in stone. I don't want to come on here and, oh, yeah, guaranteed Ronnie Stanley's going to be a member of the Ravens. Of course not. That's not what I'm trying to say whatsoever here. But both Harbaugh and DeCosta seemed pretty optimistic. DeCosta using the word optimistic, and John Harbaugh even going a step further than that to say that Ronnie will be a part of the team in 2025. Plus, I think something we have to remember, and this may be one of the more underrated facts here, the Ravens offensive line is a pretty young group if you take out Ronnie Stanley. Stanley has become kind of the veteran leader in that room. If Patrick McCary does leave, it's Tyler Linderbaum, Roger Rosengarten is your 2 mainstay guys, but then even if you want to throw in guys from the roster to start next season, like a Daniel Falele or an Andrew Voorhees, I mean, that's still a really young group. So I think it's important for Baltimore to have a veteran leader. The craziest timeline, in my opinion, on the offensive line would be Kevin Zeitler coming back to the Ravens on a deal, and he ends up shifting in for Falele, and then they bring back Ronnie Stanley, and we're like right back to where we were almost in 2023, which would be unbelievable. But look, I think that Ronnie Stanley, it is a good move if the Ravens do that. And I see Zeke saying main priority for the Ravens needs to be keeping Stanley and rebuilding the offensive line. This was always going to be a multi-year offensive line rebuild, starting off last season, where they knew they needed to get younger, more athletic on the line. That's why I don't think Kevin Zeitler is realistic, honestly. The Ravens have a plan for what they want to do, But if a team like the Commanders comes in, who have a bunch of cap space, and they want to offer Ronnie a 2-year deal worth $50 million total, $25 per year, the Ravens probably wouldn't be comfortable matching that, but maybe Stanley does take some level of a hometown discount to be able to go in and say, hey, I want to finish my career in Baltimore. I don't know how many years Ronnie Stanley has left. I'd be comfortable offering Ronnie a 2-year deal, maybe 3 at the max if I'm Baltimore. If a team comes in, offers 4, I don't think Baltimore goes that high. So we're going to see. But I see Lettuce saying bring in Ronnie back is a good move. Would like to find another Rosengarten in this draft, though. McCary's likely to go somewhere for a check. And then Falele needs to go. I see also as well from Lettuce. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that McCary probably does leave. He's a very valuable piece, and I think that will be an underrated loss, but not necessarily a loss as a starter. I feel like McCary's role is a super sub-offensive lineman. If they were to get him back on a 3-year, $20 million deal, that's great. If that number starts to go up to $10 million per season, then I feel like that is probably a way that you say, yeah, that's not going to work out here. And I see Will saying McCary is a solid backup quality, versatile lineman, not starter quality. It's good business to let him walk. I'd probably say the most realistic outcome, especially based off of Harbaugh and DeCosta's comments, are to bring back Stanley and to let McCary walk, especially because both John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta talked about the guard position, saying that there are multiple guys, whether it be first-round talent, other guys throughout the process that can come in and give their drafting teams really good immediate impact guard play. And I think that the Ravens definitely have a couple of those guys on their itinerary for guys that they can potentially go and draft. And Tyler Booker from Alabama, he's probably not going to fall in the Ravens range, but I mean, if he does, that's a slam dunk. I'm running the card up to the podium and taking him if I'm the Ravens at 27. But the Ravens had a couple of guards they liked last season, apparently. A couple guys that they didn't get in their range. They took Rosengarten, and then by the time their next pick came up, those guys were gone. So I feel like they're going to try to correct that mistake this season, and that's one of my big takeaways from what Harbaugh and DeCosta had to say is that, look, building up the trenches. Harbaugh talked about defensive linemen. So did Eric DeCosta. I know that Harbaugh was a pretty much like it wasn't a straight up, we like our guys thing, but he did say that, the confidence in that group, Van Noy, Owe, etc., wasn't like that wavered in any way, shape, or form for him. So I do think that Baltimore has multiple opportunities to upgrade their roster this offseason, particularly on the offensive line. So I'm glad that the Ravens feel pretty confident about bringing Ronnie back. Again, I want to make it clear, not a guarantee that he comes back. But I was kind of on the fence, like, do they want to bring him back? Do they want to get younger? Do they want to draft somebody else? But now hearing what they had to say, I feel pretty confident that Ronnie could come back and could be back here in 2025. Other things, the big one that we're going to be talking about a lot tomorrow, we're going to talk about it right here, though, as well. Mark Andrews. Eric DeCosta was asked about Mark Andrews and obviously the stuff that happened in the playoffs and kind of what the future is, the tight end group in general, was very complimentary of all the players in that tight end room. Andrews, likely, Kolar, saying they all work together well. But then Eric DeCosta started to, I don't want to say he got sappy about Mark Andrews, but he kind of went on this like appreciation answer of Mark, saying, quote, Mark's going to go down as one of our great players. He'll be in the Ring of Honor one day. I love having Mark on the team. He's an awesome player. I know he's going to have an amazing season. We'll figure out all the roster machinations over the coming weeks. And then even went as far to say a little bit more, saying that there's no bigger Mark Andrews fan than me. He's been a blessing to have on the team. Now, this answer for a lot of people definitely caused, I don't want to say controversy, but it certainly brought up, okay, is this Eric DeCosta saying his final farewell to Mark Andrews in answer form, right? That's the big one here. Because we know that Mark Andrews, if the Ravens do end up moving on, cutting, trading, they're going to save a whole heck of a lot of money, $11 million. Mark Andrews has a $16.9 million cap hit this year. $11 million is not chump change for the Baltimore Ravens. You can talk about some of the other moves the Ravens can make, like procedural stuff. If they move on from Arthur Millette, that saves a couple $1 million. $11 million is a lot of money. Now, Mark Andrews is somebody that I expect to have a good season, whether it be in Baltimore or somewhere else. But the reality of Baltimore's situation right now, and we've talked a lot about this on the show previously, if you've tuned in, the Ravens are going to have to decide between Mark and Isaiah Likely next season. They can make it work this year. They can, but I would probably say the best plan to me would probably be either a trade where you get a day 2 pick at the absolute minimum, ideally a second. If you can get a first for him, that's fine, but ideally a second. Or you can restructure the deal, have them together for one more season, free up a little bit more money, maybe add a void year or 2 onto it to lessen the cap hit this season, but you pay a little bit extra down the line. But then Isaiah becomes the tight end 1. I think a lot of people are in agreement, and this is my opinion on it, that Isaiah Likely should be the Ravens tight end 1 after next season at the very maximum. Maybe even starting this year, depending on if Mark does leave or stay. But all of these compliments about, okay, we're going to figure out the roster stuff over the coming weeks. It kind of feels like the Ravens, it's not like Andrews is guaranteed to come back one way or the other, but it feels like while I had expressed confidence that Andrews could be back with the Ravens next season, well, now it feels a lot more murky than that. And I think it does make sense. Like if the Ravens were to move on from Andrews, it'd be a tough blow to the offense. Lamar and Mark, we know those guys have absolutely unreal chemistry. That is not easy to build. Isaiah Likely and Lamar have developed their own set of chemistry with each other, but it's not the same with Lamar and Mark. That stuff has been forged over years. They came into the league together in 2018. They're brothers, right? They love each other. Not that Isaiah and Lamar don't. They obviously do, and they have their backs. Everybody has each other's back on that team. But, man, it just feels like this could be the end for Mark Andrews. Now, there wasn't enough in DeCosta's answer to take away that Andrews is not going to be back with the team, right? I think that would be a stretch. But I think a lot of people are feeling doubt with Andrews in his situation now because obviously in the playoffs, he hasn't been able to shine when the lights have been the brightest, right? And obviously in that Buffalo game had multiple key mistakes that he wasn't the only reason Baltimore lost that game, but he was a key contributor in it. And I see Will here saying Likely is a superstar waiting to blow up. I 100% agree with this. Likely will get paid, whether it is in Baltimore or whether it is somewhere else. Either or. Doesn't matter. If the Ravens decide to keep Mark Andrews over Isaiah Likely's going to be paid like a tight end 1 because right now, I think the Ravens have 2 top 10 tight ends in the league in Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. That is I don't know if that's bold or not. I don't really feel like it's that bold. But in my opinion, the Ravens do have 2 top 10 guys. And losing a top 10 guy at a position is always tough, but it does feel like the writing's on the wall, at least after next year, especially with what Eric DeCosta had to say. Like, yes, he is an all-time Raven, 100%. I agree with everything Eric DeCosta said here, and I don't think that we should taint Mark Andrews' career just because of a couple of bad games in the postseason. Yes, it's rough that has happened, but it doesn't take away from the Raven that he has been. But it's almost like a passing of the baton moment I think needs to happen here, whether it be this offseason or at the end of next year, from Mark Andrews to Isaiah Likely. If the Ravens choose Andrews over Likely, Andrews is a really talented player. He's been one of the best at his position for years. I think that's a mistake because you have to not only think for the year ahead, but for the next 5 years. And when we're sitting here in 2030, talking about, I guess that's 60. Oh yeah, 5 technically from 2025. But if we're talking about that in 2030, Mark Andrews probably, I don't know if he's going to be playing or not. He'll probably be on the tail end of his career, if anything. Likely is going to be, in my opinion, a better player at that point than Mark Andrews. And I see Lettuce here. Likely has to be tight end 1 next season. And we absolutely have 2 of the top 10 tight ends in the league, despite Mark's atrocious play in the last game. And yeah, look, thought of Likely going to another AFC team haunts my nightmares. Imagine Isaiah Likely. You know how badly the Bengals need a tight end? Do you know how badly the Bengals have needed a tight end in the Joe Burrow era? Imagine the Bengals, and I know this is a little far-fetched because the Bengals don't like to pony up money like that, but imagine the Bengals go out there and sign Isaiah Likely. That would be an unreal play for them, and the Ravens can't let it happen. The Ravens can't let Likely go to a competitor, and it's just good for their own business of keeping Likely in the fold. So I thought that was a really interesting answer from Eric DeCosta. Again, not enough in there to say definitively one way or the other if he's staying or going. But if we wake up one morning and we get that notification, Mark Andrews traded to the Chargers or another team. Chargers make a lot of sense with the Harbaugh connection. They also need a tight end. If they can get a second or a third round pick for Mark Andrews while also clearing up some of their cap space to go after a guy or re-sign a Ronnie Stanley or whatever, that is what it is. And I see Spirit Bomb talking about Andrews as an all-time great, but we really didn't miss a beat with Likely at the helm when Andrews was down. And that is true. Andrews, and again, I don't want to make this feel like I'm like diminishing the value and the impact that Mark Andrews has, because he is a great player and a Ring of Honor player for the Ravens. But the fact that they have Likely waiting in the wings here to fully break out, right? We've seen Likely have those breakout games, breakout moments, but we did see Andrews go down, and we have seen Likely step in and produce at that high level. So I think, to me, yeah, maybe this is something here like to do the Ravens package Andrews for some level of a pass rusher, right? That would be an interesting move the Ravens could make. So there are all those hypotheticals we can get into, but I think the answer for Eric DeCosta and the Ravens is not as clear cut as maybe some of us think it is. They have to go through the evaluation process of, whether they feel like Andrews could get the proper value. Because look, there's a certain threshold where it's just like not worth it to trade him. If their best offer is a 5th round pick for Mark Andrews, you have to evaluate, is that worth getting $11 million in cap space? Some people might think it is. If you outright want to cut Mark Andrews, you'll take any draft capital back. But I think there has to be a minimum threshold of a day 2 pick, round 3 or above, that you have to have if you're Baltimore, because you don't just want to give a player up for nothing, especially considering the impact that he does have and the attention that he does take away from defenses. So really interesting answer from Eric DeCosta on that. And coming up, we'll talk about some other general takeaways, including how the Ravens want to build their team and the input that Lamar Jackson has. Really interesting conversation coming up on Locked On Ravens. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Tuesday afternoon live stream. Appreciate everybody for tuning in video form. If you're watching live with us, appreciate you checking in live in the chat. If you're watching after the fact in video form or audio form listening, appreciate you everybody as well. Hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form. We got 5 days a week for you of Ravens coverage, even in the offseason. And I saw up here, where's the Pixie Cup suit? Well, let me tell you, this has been the most painful experience ever. I was ordering it from out of the country. This has been on order, canceling orders for 2 months. There have been other restrictions with getting stuff into the country. It's just this whole thing for me where I think I have it. The site I'm using to order it has all these complications. For those that don't know, my 10,000 thing, I was going to wear a Pixie Cup suit outfit for a week. I've been trying to get it here for months. It hasn't gotten here. I'm going to make it up to everybody somehow with that, but I just want to give an update because it has been an absolute nightmare to try to get that into this area to wear it. So that's just a little thing there. We also have new YouTube thumbnails. Really excited about those. It's a new process. So new look on YouTube for the thumbnails, still the same Ravens content here on Locked On Ravens. Now, Eric DeCosta had an interesting thing to say about Lamar Jackson. Now, the good thing about his answer and what I'm going to talk about here is that it still feels like Lamar does have major input on how the team is built. He talked about how, quote, Lamar's got a great voice and he's a student of the game. He watches players. He knows talent. He does love the Miami and the Florida guys. And we know that because he has given recommendations to Eric DeCosta, Zay Flowers being a Florida guy, some others as well. So it does feel like Lamar does have that input. And DeCosta said, look, Lamar is a stakeholder. He's a partner. He's earned that right to have that type of input and opinion. A lot of guys haven't earned that right, but Lamar has earned it. It's important. It's necessary. I welcome his input. I'll get texts from him, and there have been some years where I've gone down and visited with him. I'll probably do that again, take a trip down to Florida and spend some time with him. He's got a great command of the offense. He's made great strides this year in every facet. He's my MVP. I think his impact on our team is impossible to measure. It is true. The Lamar Jackson effect, you can try to make it like, oh, okay, what is the actually quantitative value of what Lamar brings to the table? You can't really quantify it. Like, he is incredible, whether you talk about him saving his offensive lineman from giving up sacks, making something out of nothing, the Lamar Jackson effect of opening up rushing lanes for Derrick Henry when other people follow him. Lamar is unreal. And with your franchise players, that's what it is, franchise player. And franchise players should have impact on the franchise. And that doesn't mean that Eric DeCosta all of a sudden gives up his job to Lamar Jackson and Lamar Jackson brings in every single Florida player under the sun. That's not how it works. But it's a team effort. And it really feels like that in the Ravens organization, where Todd Monken, John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, a team working on that offense. Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh, Steve Bisciotti, Lamar Jackson is a team working together. I don't think that while Lamar doesn't have final say in what happens, I think that the Ravens do value his input. Again, remember the Ravens a couple offseasons ago, Lamar was like, hey, Odell Beckham Jr., DeAndre Hopkins, I'd love to play with one of those guys. And the Ravens went out there and they listened to Lamar Jackson there. Maybe that was more to appease Lamar during the contract negotiations, and it certainly worked. Odell didn't have like the best year in Baltimore, especially not based off of his deal. But Lamar having input on those decisions is, I think, a thing that builds trust between everybody involved. And Lamar does have that eye for talent. It's not like the Ravens are just like, oh, we just have to appease Lamar. We're just going to do it because we have to, and he's our franchise guy. No, the Ravens actually value what Lamar has to say, because some teams do it that way, where they almost feel like it's a chore to get their franchise player involved in some of these decisions, where I think for the Ravens, they actually do genuinely value Lamar's opinion, and I think that is a really, really good thing that they do. Eric DeCosta was also asked if he was on board with Derrick Henry, and was the whole, okay, Derrick wants to finish his career in Baltimore. He said, quote, well, I see Michelle over here and she helps decorate my office wall. We have a picture of Derrick going up on my wall. So what does that tell you? Tells you a lot. Tells you a lot. I think that definitely means Derrick Henry is probably going to get an extension this offseason. It makes sense. Henry's cap hit is inflated this season due to this being the second year of his 2-year deal. Obviously, with that, the Ravens like to make those deals backloaded. So last year's cap hit was not as big. This year's cap hit is inflated. If you extend Derrick Henry, you can spread out that cap hit over the remainder of his contract. I expect a 2-year extension for Derrick Henry here. And even if they only tack on 1 year to Derrick's deal, you can free up money by doing that. That's why extensions are so valuable. So talking about a guy like Linderbaum, Hamilton, Lamar even, do you extend or restructure his contract? Maybe that's something DeCosta and Lamar talk about when DeCosta's down in Florida. But it's a no-brainer to extend Derrick Henry here. He had an unreal year, best year of his career in Baltimore in year one with Lamar. That pairing, I mean, people kind of hated on it when it happened, to be honest. Not Ravens fans, but like national, oh, does Derrick Henry have enough in the tank? Yeah, well, Derrick Henry had more than enough, and he still can probably go for a handful more of seasons. I also think for DeCosta, he was honest about the Ravens and their ability to be super active in free agency. He said that's probably not the way it's going to work. He said, quote, I mean, you guys know the Ravens, right player, right price. We don't have a lot of cap room. Nick Mateo, who's their VP of football administration, he's working tirelessly to find some space for us. Eric DeCosta said, we'll call it couch cushion coins. We're trying to find 50,000 here, 75,000 there in the couch cushions. We're not a team that's going to make a lot of big splashes, generally speaking. He also made clear that the draft is going to be that avenue with 11 draft picks. We're going to have 11 draft picks this year. My goal will be to hit on a large percentage of those picks to find good, young, and inexpensive talent to put guys in for the future. And then went on again. This was the honest part of it here. And this is something I've been saying. The reality of it is when you're paying guys like Lamar Jackson, and the Marlon Humphreys, Nnamdi Madubuike's, Roquan Smiths, someday guys like Tyler Linderbaum, Kyle Hamilton, you've got to draft well every single year so you always have an open window. Rookie contracts for the Ravens is an absolute massive thing, especially when you do have those big contracts. Because, for example, having a franchise tackle potentially in Roger Rosengarten for 3 more years on a rookie salary helps the Ravens make major moves, not necessarily major in terms of they're signing 8 guys, but major moves like they can afford to sign 1 guy here or re-sign another guy there. That's a big thing. So I'm not expecting big splashes from the Ravens this offseason. I think Ronnie Stanley might constitute as that big splash, if we're being honest, which I would like to see 1 or 2 guys come in, but ideally their big splash would be a pass rusher. We'll see what ends up happening there. But in my opinion, the Ravens do have avenues to improve their team, but with not a lot of guys leaving in free agency, it feels like this offseason, maybe Brandon Stevens, McCary, that feels like the big names to watch. They have an opportunity to improve their roster tenfold this offseason, which I'm really excited about as well. So I think that overall, John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta, bold claims on Ronnie Stanley's future. I didn't expect them to outright say they're that confident in bringing Ronnie back, but I'm very happy they did. Broke their silence on the Justin Tucker situation. Mark Andrews, that conversation going to be flowing. We'll definitely talk about that more tomorrow on Locked On Ravens in more detail. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens Instant Reaction Live Edition. If you haven't already, be sure to watch this morning's episode of the show where we talked about some draft combine standouts to watch for the Ravens positions to look at as well. And on the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form as well for that 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.